Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. On today's show, we have Sandra Vásconez. Uh, Big long bio here. Is a senior instructor in civil, environmental, and architectural engineering at the University of Colorado Boulder. She teaches lighting courses with an emphasis on lighting application and design to architectural engineering and environmental design students. Sandra has been at the helm of the lighting program at CU for 14 years, is the director of the Architectural Lighting Certificate for Lighting Professionals, co-creator and co-director of the Rocky Mountain Lighting Academy, manager of the Lighting Design Certificate offered to non-engineering students, and faculty co-advisor of the CU Boulder IES Student Chapter. Masters of Science in Lighting from the Lighting Research Center at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. She worked at the LRC as adjunct faculty, teaching graduate level lighting courses and working as program manager. And she has a Master's of Arts degree from the University of Denver in Art History and Museum Studies. Besides her work and interest in lighting, she also worked in museum exhibition design. Greg Eric. But before we talk to Sandra, I think we got to get a little focused here, buddy. We got to go to the original. Focus in on the original, energyfocus.com. That's ENERGYFOCUS.com, Greg Eric.
Human-centric lighting. Let's talk about that for a minute. I don't know if we'll get into it today. We often do, so we'll see. But with nFocus, it puts you in control of lighting the way you want it, and likely without having to change a fixture. So you can reuse your existing linear fluorescent fixture, bypass the ballast, no need for rewiring. Everything's built into the tube. Put the tubes in the nFocus, change the switch on the wall. You have 10-stage dimming, color tuning with a push of a button, no flicker, and it is the lowest cost option for human-centric lighting that I know of for both the install side and product side. Check it out.
And right here in Get a Grip Studios, I have my nFocus system. Tuning is to 2021 what dimming is to 1969, folks. Tunable is dimmable. Everybody, that's the most thing. It makes so much sense to the customers out there, folks. So go to ENERGYFOCUS, the original, energyfocus.com. Of course, proud members, Greg, of the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Go to NAILD.org. And I know we're going to talk about lighting education here in a second, but if you want to get educated and you've been in the industry for a long time, why not challenge the LC exam, Greg Eric, coming up in November, I believe.
It's coming up. It's a PhD in lighting. You can go get it right now. Get it done.
NCQLP.org, our good friends down there. But for right now, how's it going, Sandra?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure.
Thank
Where do you want to start?
Oh, that's a.
I just look at all this stuff here. I'm like, holy mackerel! Do you want to talk about technology? You go, Greg. You start that.
I've got a question. I want to know. I've always been curious about this program at the University of Colorado Boulder. I've never been there, full disclosure, but I am curious about it. So you're the co-creator of the Rocky Mountain Lighting Academy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. When did you? It said 14 years ago. Why did you create it? And give us a background story on that.
Okay, so let me start. The 14 years ago, I actually entered the world of education at the University of Colorado as a instructor for undergraduate students, undergraduate and graduate students. That is our focus in the lighting program within our department, and so that has been our focus for many years at the University of Colorado. But we have also noticed that not only the students that are coming for a bachelor's degree or master's degree need education. And that's where we thought that maybe we can, with all the experience that we have, we could actually provide education to lighting professionals. So the Rocky Mountain Lighting Academy came about in 2012. Our very first course started in 2013. And our idea was to provide lighting education to people already in the industry that needed a really deep dive. So we were counting on the industry to provide the breadth of education with light fair, and we know that the manufacturers offer lighting education, but a lot of that education sometimes is leveling and sometimes is providing what is needed at that point in time. maybe a new technology is coming into the market, maybe a new luminaire or controls are coming into the market. So education at where the industry is. And we thought that if we take a step back and not discounting everything that is needed for the task at hand, that we could provide a little bit of foundation, the whys and the hows of lighting. And so that was our idea, was come immerse yourself in 4 days, really intense 4 days. Come to campus, come to our laboratory, do some lighting measurements so that you understand where photometry and photometric reports and what that information is telling you. And now you understand why and what those numbers mean. For example, among many other things, we thought that that would be useful for the lighting industry. So we started
Sure.
with a technical course, and we were gearing for manufacturers and technical people. But then we obtained a grant from the IES, and part of our deliverables was to create a second course in design. So now we were opening our offerings to technical people as well as design. And now we offer this summer course, 4 days with 2 tracks, technical and design. The idea is that the first 2 days, everybody needs to know the fundamentals, no matter what track you are. And then we divide you into your own areas for the rest of the time.
Got
So,
it.
so
So,
that's the beginning of the RMLA.
okay. So, and then prior to that, the undergraduate, I think I read it started 40 years ago. Is it something like that?
Y- Yes, and interesting, if you like history, I wrote some numbers, and actually we had lighting since the beginning of the electrical engineering department in 1893.
Hmm.
So interestingly, the College of Engineering was just two departments, civil and electrical. And within electrical, we had our first photometric laboratory with our first lighting course, obligatory for the electrical engineering students in 1897. That's
Wow.
amazing. Um,
That is
Oh,
amazing.
yeah.
after
Hmm.
that, there was a lull. Everybody was focused on something else, and that is where you pick up. 40 years ago with Ron Helms and then David Delora. That's what we truly began teaching lighting beyond just one course. Right now, we offer 7 courses to our undergraduate and graduate students, and so there has been an evolution based on where the industry is, and the fact that lighting design has also become um, a true profession, right? A recognized profession.
And so these 7 courses is typically part of someone's undergraduate degree, like a certificate portion, or who are the students that usually take this?
So we are housed in architectural engineering. In
Okay.
architectural engineering, by definition, then has to take into account the different other aspects of a building, right? So, of a cohort of architectural engineers, students have the ability to focus on mechanical HVAC or structures or electrical or lighting. So, out of that full group, we would get a percentage of the students who choose to do lighting. And historically, we've always, plus minus 25% of the population come to lighting.
Okay. And so how many, do you have any idea of the number of students that have gone through these courses?
Uh, it's in the high,
Okay.
yeah, hundreds,
Sure.
500, 600 students. Yeah. Um, So imagine when I started in 2007, the architectural engineering class was about 90 students, and we got 25% of those.
Okay.
With a recession in 2008, there was every university that offer architectural engineering, we saw a shrinking in our population, and we've gone as low as 30 students. And out of those 30 students, we've had 25, 30% of those. So,
Sure.
it just fluctuates in terms of what the economy is doing, the construction industry is doing, and so forth. Yeah.
Sure.
So in the last 5 minutes, I've written down like 10 points. I'm trying to decide where to start. Okay, I'll start with this. I have it's kind of a strange belief about education. I think all education is history. So when you're studying lighting, you're studying the history of lighting, right? And you're in a way, it's like this is what we've learned up until now. And when you're looking at manufacturer, when they say education, they're talking about sales training, usually. Not always, but most of the time they're talking about this is why our product creates this effect or that effect. And really what they're talking about is how to sell their products to people. Um, with Nailed, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, our educational suite is heavily focused on not heavily, there's an LED module in it, but it goes through all the different iterations and types of lighting that have been created from the candle forward. And why these things, and oftentimes we'll have members say that why are we wasting our time learning this? I think that so many mistakes in the LED era have been caused by people not understanding the innovations of the fluorescent era, like the flicker innovation from T12 to T8, and then some of the other things that we've learned along the way. In your programs, do you guys get into the technology types as a part of the lighting? And CFL, linear fluorescent, metal halide, HPS. Do you guys study those individual technologies, how they worked and how they developed?
Yes, yes.
Mm,
So the first introduction to our students to technology is in the second course, Illumination 2. And that's the argument that I make to the students is that um, understand that the world that you're getting into is all about LEDs. But first of all, um, I'm going to venture and say 80% of old construction is still legacy sources. You're still going to have to work with and understand these sources. So let's not kid ourselves that students are just going to do new construction. That is never the case. Um, and as you point out, I think is very important to understand where we came from, right? So, yes, we dedicate time, and perhaps not as when I started 14 years ago. So, the amount of time that we dedicate to each technology in terms of legacy sources is not the same as before. Now is less. But we do make a point of teaching them how the lamps work, ballasts, inefficiencies of those sources, what works with those sources, and how is that LED could try to recreate some of the good things of that technology. Not everything was bad,
hmm
right? Not everything was bad. And so if they are able to understand that, that's a win for us. And then in the subsequent courses, for example, optical design, where they're talking again about flicker, then they revisit this idea of, well, how does it happen, and where it happens, and how do you prevent it, and you need to understand the background of that in order to solve the problem. So yes, the emphasis obviously is becoming less and less just because there's more knowledge that we want to make sure that the students um, come when they graduate, have when they graduate. But absolutely, I agree with you.
Do you, I want to talk, and this is just, I don't know if this is even a question that can be answered, but I think we, as an industry and in education and all that, I think we need to send lighting back to the physics and biology departments for a little bit. Um, because I find there's a lot of companies and engineers that are prescribing it's not an engineering issue, all the circadian effects and the various integrative lighting or health effects or human-centric things. I don't think we understand enough about what light does yet to really. There's some things we can do for sure, but I want to be cautious when speaking to people about this because I feel like we're on the threshold of the learning. We're not on the threshold of the deploying. Do you guys, do you know, are you aware of it? Is there one at Colorado, or did the physics and biology department, did they study the health effects of lighting? Did they study what light is and what it does for the universe and so on and so forth? Is there much of that going on?
We have in our psychology department actually,
Hmm
uh, a um, a professor, and his name escapes me right now, but he has been putting output out there regarding light and health,
Hmm.
and in terms of how that affects physiology and psychology.
Hmm.
I'm not aware of anybody in biology necessarily. Physics, I know that they are focused more on LEDs and the technology itself,
Hmm.
more than how that technology affects people.
Hmm.
So those two tracks are, one is really focusing on the technology and what's behind the technology, if you will, in order to make strides to create the newest LED with a different color, right? That is
Hmm.
native to a color other than the ones that we have, for example. And then we have the psychology department. One of the courses out of the 7 that we offer is in the psychology department,
Hmm.
right? So we don't rely, we don't offer, we don't kid ourselves that just the we have 2 instructors, and we rely a lot heavily on our alumni um, and professionals to help us round our knowledge, but we also don't kid ourselves that we know everything, right? So 2 of those courses, one is through the psychology department where they take a course in lighting perception, the perception of
Hmm.
light, and then the second course is through the theater department, and
Hmm.
that is to for the students to be able to really bring wake their imaginations from moving their engineering aside
Hmm.
to the other side of the brain, really bringing the artistic side. So I guess where you're getting is whether there's a multidisciplinary approach to our education, and the answer is yes. To what degree are we turning students eh, to the absolutely latest level of knowledge? I don't think we're there, just as like the industry is not there,
Hmm.
right? And the idea is for education in general, I think is very difficult for us to teach and understand what to teach in a moment of transition.
Hmm.
What do you teach to students who in 2 years
Hmm.
are going to graduate while the technology is exponentially changing, or where
Hmm.
controls are changing, or where light and health and knowledge is changing, that it would be true 2 years later down the road, right? So
Hmm.
our approach is always, let's stay with the fundamentals, because
Hmm.
if you understand the underlining of things, then you can at least question what does not make sense to you. And that is with technology, that would be with light and health, and any other topic.
The yeah, the um well, just lost my train of thought there for a second. Oh, but the when you're one of the places that you can learn a lot about lighting, and this is interesting, is on the actual order desk of a nail distributor, Greg. When you're
Oh, for
seeing the
sure.
products, like you're handling the
Mhm.
products,
Yeah.
it's actually
Mhm.
it's very you don't even realize that you're learning. But when people part of the training at my company is people kind of work all the jobs, they work the counter, they hold the light fixtures, they see the light bulbs, the tubes, we put them in, and you watch the technology sort of evolve in front of your very eyes as because it's happening so fast. Um,
Yeah.
do you guys get into a lot of products? Do you talk about this is a recessed luminaire? This is a 2x4 troffer. Do you get into a lot
Yes.
of that stuff? Oh,
We
great.
do, because we have, since we teach for um, many of us student or our students are getting into lighting design, lighting specification. They need to know that vocabulary, right? And so that is also part of the foundational course, where we're talking about, when we're talking about technologies, we're talking about lamps, we're talking about drivers, ballasts, transformers, and then we're talking about the different types of luminaires that exist, right? And it's just so interesting how do you start talking and creating a vocabulary of form factors that with LEDs, right? Because LEDs now are not coming necessarily only on a 2x4 form factor or just a downlight. Now you have curves and you have lines and you have all kinds of abstract shapes. And the question is, how do you start talking about those things? And so yes, we see that type of conversation in several courses as the students keep progressing in their knowledge.
I see, Jerry, I'm just going to jump in here because I remember what my train of thought was. Um, I see like this theatrical lighting and general lighting used to be two completely different worlds. Like there was very little crossover. When I talk to lighting designers now, they almost sound like theatrical lighting designers when they're talking about these, like you're experiencing museums, and there's like a there's like a melding or something happening between the what we know from theatrical, the contrast ratios that theatrical lighting uses
Mhm.
to create, dark crowds in a bright stage, and the person on stage can't even see the crowd. The contrast ratio is so high, but you can see everything so beautifully. These principles are starting to creep into the general lighting industry. I've heard lighting designers speak as if they're theatrical. They're making a
Yeah.
theatrical move in this place. Are you experiencing that, and is your education sort of moving towards that a little bit of combining those things together?
We are, and that's exactly why we want the students to have the theater experience for those who really want to go into lighting design as their focus, right? Not necessarily lighting application is an architectural engineer. So there's companies that are architectural engineer firms that straddle lighting and electrical, but it's very practical, right? A stadium or a hospital and so forth. And then you have your lighting design firms that you describe, which is all about the budget is there, the theatrics are needed because the budget is there, and so. Um, so we try to instill this, but not at the cost of the fundamentals. Not at the cost of the fundamentals. One of the things that, in my experience, in my years in lighting, I noticed that the theater um, people that transitioned to lighting, architectural lighting, were the ones that were doing the theatrical things, and it was kind of exclusive to them, that the Howard Branstons of the world. And um, we still have several lighting designers that came from theater, and we were always at awe at how easy it was for them to come up with these contrasts, and not being afraid of using color. The trend that I see is that now on this other side, the lighting designers are crossing to theater, right? And they're the ones that are really trying to understand, well, what does it mean to create emotion in a box, right? You only have so much space and you have so much technology, and yet the person seeing is able to feel that emotion. So yes, I'm seeing the crossover to the other side. What I'm afraid is that because we get so excited about color and about the fact that LEDs, we can tuck them in and this and that, that we focus on that and we don't step back and say, well, what does that mean to the eye? What does that mean to my comfort? What does that mean to longevity of equipment and sustainability? And so we're always bringing students back to say, when you're in the field, you will be able to do your best job ever with color and everything. But for now, make sure that you understand why and how this works so that you can question what you're being told.
Yeah, and I think that's more important than ever with all that's new in the LED world, especially. And kind of on that subject, to some degree, with your classes, I assume there's some hands-on training knowledge with products. Do you guys have a partnership with a manufacturer that helps support this, or do you have to pick and choose, or how do you guys work that out?
So we actually don't have a particular manufacturer that we work with. We actually work with our local reps.
Hmm.
So we have had our local reps. We have 5 here in Denver that I'm aware of lately, where on a whim we can go ahead and say, we're going to do a little exercise outdoors. Would you be able to provide luminaires for our exercise in such a way that we can shine things at the wall and the trees and so forth, right? We get donations from manufacturers, as a matter of fact, and we haven't spoken about our certificate, which is different from the RMLA, our lighting certificate. We just graduated 6 professional lighting professionals from our certificate, and when they were here on campus, they were like, we're going to donate some equipment from you for you, right? And so sometimes is just luck of the draw, and sometimes is really very specific because we need something to accomplish something for a class, and then we rely on
Sure.
our reps.
Good. So you have the 7 courses for the undergraduate. You have the Rocky Mountain Lighting Academy, which is a 4-day session. Are you still running those right now, or is that something that's been on hold for now?
We 2 years, unfortunately, because of COVID and the uncertainty, we didn't offer, but we're going to offer that in 2022. So next summer we
Good.
will be offering the RMLA. And I should distinguish, RMLA is basically our professional umbrella, if you will, just as the lighting program has the umbrella for undergrads and grads. So, under the umbrella of the Rocky Mountain Lighting Academy, we have these 2 summer courses that are intensive. And then we created our lighting certificate, which is 3 courses over the course of roughly 9 months, um, where lighting professionals can actually come and learn at a slower pace, and actually earn credit. So the RMLA, the 4-day course, is not for credit, is a deep dive, but you receive a certificate of completion. This other one, you actually get 9 credits of university, university credits that are
And it's something
recognized
where
by the
you
university.
you actually
Sorry.
need to be there in person physically, or it's a combination of online.
So our philosophy is always that you learn by seeing and touching. And so
Hmm.
RMLA, we bring you for the 4 days. For the 9 months, we are aware that people over the world and the country want education. And so, with technology now, and because of COVID, it was a perfect opportunity for us to test and we did our pilot. Um, so, out of the 3 courses, 2 are online. And so we started the fall, we moved to the spring, and then in the summer, we're like, you cannot graduate until you have come for 1 week, intensive 1 week to us. You're in the lighting lab, you're measuring, we're doing mock-ups, we're doing whatever we need to do in order to really round your education, and then the certificate is over.
And how often with all of these courses, I know this is a big question and kind of generalized, but are you changing content? Is it every year you need to go into each course and look and reevaluate? Or is there, I know you talked fundamentals and I assume a lot of that can stay, but with the changes that happen, how do you adapt to that?
So specifically, let's talk about the certificate. The certificate, the first course is all about the fundamentals. Let's level everybody because we're not saying all we're asking for the certificate is a bachelor's degree, and it could be in anything. The assumption is that you're either coming to the lighting industry, you have been in the lighting industry, and you don't have a document that says that you know what you know, right? And we're going to level you on the first course. Um, some students say, this is enough for me. This is all I needed to know. And they can actually just leave and not complete the certificate. And we're fine with that, right? Because I think that now we've accomplished something important. The second course is all about what is happening now in order for you to be productive in your work. So that's the course that is going to be constantly changing depending on what is the latest thing happening. And so right now there's a module. We divide the semester in modules. There's a module on light and health. There's a module on daylighting, a module on controls, and I'm forgetting the fourth module, right? And we really go do a deep dive on those, and we anticipate that that's the course that is going to be revamp pretty often. Is the same with the RMLA. Yeah.
And are you finding that a lot of the students that come and take any of these courses, aside from the undergraduate, um, are an individual choice, or are they corporate initiatives where a company says, hey, if you're going to work for us, we're going to send you through the academy?
A lot of our students are coming through sponsorship from their companies.
Okay.
Um, Yes, and we find that a few, if we put percentage, maybe it's an 80-20. What 80% are coming from companies and 20% are their own choice because they feel that they need to educate themselves. It's a heavy lift, obviously, like with any education program, in particular, if you're going to spend 9 months with us, it's going to be costly. um, but it's not as costly as you coming in person and receiving education in person, right? So we've, I think the pricing is reasonable for what you get.
And
And
are
is
you
that's
finding? Yeah.
and I was just going to say, and that is why we're not forcing students to buy into the certificate, because that's a heavy commitment, right? So we are saying, if you find the first course valuable, register for the second, and I think once you're in the second, you may as well finish the third one, right? So our expectation and how we presented this to the university as a certificate is that we say we anticipate that the first course is going to have a lot of people, and then for the rest of the certificate, maybe we go to two-thirds of the people, and we're totally fine with that because that is the level of commitment to this program is what we want. We want you to want to be there.
And are you finding that a majority of the students that come or go through the courses are lighting designers, or are you getting other types of lighting careers and
We're
positions
getting
here?
from all the gamut. We're getting manufacturers, sales representatives, lighting designers, engineers, all kinds of people, which is why it's important to use that leveling course to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
So many people don't know how many different kinds of careers are available to them in the lighting industry. And if your students
Yes.
are listening to this, there's tons of different kinds of careers. It's a very dynamic and exciting industry. Most of the people we talk to back into it by accident. They end up in the lighting
Yes.
industry like, oh, I didn't realize how diverse and I was going to say perverse, but pervasive is the word I'm actually
Pervasive.
thinking. Pervasive that lighting actually is. I mean, it goes beyond plumbing or anything else. Like lighting has so many different careers available to it. Let me ask you a little bit about lighting controls, Bluetooth, digital addressable, this kind of stuff. Do you guys talk a lot about that? And how do you keep up to date?
So we currently have my colleague Jennifer Scheib. She came from NREL, the National Research Laboratory here in Golden, and she created a course called Adapted Lighting. Um, and it's all about controls. That's all. The whole course is about controls. And so again, the idea, and this is at the undergraduate, graduate level. And so the idea in going back to the question about technology, here is where we heavily approached companies to say we need to show the students what does this means. We cannot show
Mm.
them a graph about dimming, right? And we cannot show them a graph about pulse width modulation and all of these things. The students need to actually use and mix, and we have a DMX machine and for color, and by machine I mean a console, and so forth, right? So probably that class is the one that is the most equipped for students to be able to practice. And Jennifer obviously is keeping up with the times within reason, right? Because we can't react as quickly to what's happened to the minute. Sometimes we have to wait a year for the class to repeat in order for us to catch the latest thing. But by then, some of the problems or issues have been ironed up, which is helpful for us, right? So trying to teach the very, very latest is fool's errands in our uh, line of work because yeah, I remember I met a student in a conference, a graduate student, and he came to me and he said, "What you taught me about circadian rhythms was wrong." And that was 5 years before at the time, and I'm like, it was probably not wrong, it's just evolved,
Hmm.
right? And so in a way we need to use a little cautious, be cautious, in terms of just jumping in the wagon. And so what we do is we make the students aware of what's going on for sure. But in some cases, it's not feasible for us to just dive deep into some things until the technology has been proven.
One of the benefits of, ex- I don't know if it's a benefit. Technology is accelerating so quickly now that it doesn't seem like the academy can set down roots on anything. And I think that's good because we're seeing like when you look across, an educational institution, you're starting to see the collapse of long taught narratives in certain disciplines, right? Like Clovis first in North America, how people came to there's a lot of pressure on that theory, and it's collapsing, right? But that was taught so strictly that this is how it happened, and this is what happened, and this is how it is. And there's something blinding and innovation crushing about that way of teaching something to people, that we know for sure that they came this way and this is the plan, and we're not listening to any information outside of that. Another one is Egyptology, is another example of where the narrative that's been taught for 100 years
Hmm.
is collapsing. And so we have to be careful when we're teaching about things like circadian rhythm, which is really emerging um, as I do another podcast called Starving for Darkness. The purpose of it is for the preservation and restoration of natural darkness. And we were speaking to, I don't know if you know Dr. Fisher from the Zoological Lighting Institute. He's an interesting guy, perhaps for you guys, wildlife and lighting and how to
Oh,
design.
yep.
Yeah, very, very interesting,
Hmm.
actually. Guy to talk to. It might be worthwhile for, maybe to have a conversation to see if there's some connections there because they do some education as well. Um, but one of the things he said, which was really interesting, is that we think about light and dark in a binary way, and it's not appropriate. Like, now it's light and now it's dark. It's really better thought of as like we think of it like cold and hot, when really it's better thought of as like a temperature. Darkness is a certain amount of light. There's a certain amount
Yeah.
of light in darkness. And so we move forward from there. And now we have, maybe zero is 50-foot candles or 50 lux or something like that. And then you have negative 50, or there's a better way to think about it. Do you guys teach darkness, and is darkness preservation on the curriculum and restoration on the curriculum at all?
That I talk a lot about darkness in my advanced lighting design class. And the reason I do that is because with so many courses about light, the students get the impression that all solutions require light.
Hmm.
And if they're going to do lighting design, I'm trying to emphasize that there is a place and time where we don't want to use light. There's
Hmm.
a place and time where contrast and shadows
Hmm.
are important in order to create a mood or just to embellish and just create a visually enhanced environment.
Hmm.
And so we use as our guide in Praise of Shadows. That's one of the books that we use, and we start picking apart that and what does it mean in the practice of lighting? What does it
Hmm.
mean being restrained in terms of lighting? Um, and so uh, heavily in that area. With regard to restoring darkness for sustainability, that probably is a conversation that happens in the controls class,
Hmm.
right? In any level of depth. But we certainly, as a foundational class, we do talk about when we introduce controls, why are we doing this? We're not just controlling to make sure that we have a nice, instead of a switch, we have a nice dimmer. There's several reasons why you want to do controls. And part of that is the beauty of darkness,
Hmm.
right? And also the integration of daylighting,
Hmm.
daylighting into a space. That's another course that we offer, right? And the availability of daylighting and the passage of clouds that creates this different effect in a space.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That changing of light, like the idea of a steady,
absolutely.
constant, same light all the time is not natural.
Absolutely.
Whether we can recreate that electrically or not is another question. If that'll
Hmm.
be effective or not is another question. But certainly, I'm a big believer in sun tunnels and windows. So
Hmm.
I have a house full of sun tunnels. There's nothing more fascinating than being at your desk and the clouds go over and the light's changing, but
Yes.
it's still very bright, and you have these different. You wake up in the morning and there's this beautiful, like, yeah, orange, low, very color. It's not orange is the wrong word to describe it. It's a beautiful color of the rising sun and the setting
Yeah.
sun, and you get these differences. And there's something psychologically impactful about that. There's something going on there that we don't fully understand. I
Yes.
think humans have a relationship to fire. A lot of times, I think heat needs to be thought of as light. The it is really the same thing. It's the waves, right, hitting
Yeah.
you in some way, and so we
Yeah.
separate heat and light, and so there are different systems in a home, and that's not how we've evolved. We get heat from the sun, we had heat from fires and saunas and all this kind of stuff. So there's ways of thinking about light differently. I want to urge you to consider teaching darkness, because
Hmm.
the purpose of Starving for Darkness is that we want to advocate for the restoration and preservation of darkness. We know we have 150 cities in the United States now that have achieved dark sky recognition by the International
Hmm.
Dark Sky Association. The Economist had an article just this week about dark sky cities, but people are stumbling around this. They haven't accepted that darkness is not something we want to vanquish. It's
Yeah.
it it's actually the a true sign of an intelligent society, in my belief, um, would be one that is dark at night.
Yeah.
The other way around. You understand? Like
Hmm.
a society that restored darkness when the sun set as much as possible
As much
would
as
be
possible. Yeah.
as much as possible while maintaining safety and these other things would be considered in my mind to be the most intelligent of all societies.
Yeah.
They would be preserving wildlife. They would be helping people's circadian rhythms. And so we're always, and in the lighting industry, Greg, there's no max light levels, bud. There's never a
Right.
max,
Right.
you know? And this is very problematic because it's a paradox, right? The cheaper LEDs become, the more light we use,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. That is problematic.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so and that goes back, and thank you for encouraging me about thinking just of dark as not just as the counterpart to light, but actually as a um in its own right, darkness in its own right. I think that's what you're saying. Uh, but I think that that is the problem that we're facing right now, and that I encounter when I'm driving around is glare bombs everywhere. Why? Because we can. And the idea of educating people about the fact that the visual system has not changed just because LEDs have come into the equation. The visual system, we know how it works, and we understand that if you put a lot of light, first you're wasting energy, second you're not being a good engineer in the case of our students, and third you're causing problems, right? So understanding more than really harping on leds or technology is to say be careful with what you do, right? Be careful of what you have as a resource in order to be a good steward of your knowledge.
We're advocating for light pollution to be on par with plastics in the ocean and global
Hmm.
warming. If it's not, I mean, I'll accept. I'm obviously not a scientist, but I'll accept someone to say no, it's not as serious. But it certainly is a symbol of all of our excesses. You know,
Yes.
the idea, in many ways, much of what we've done with LED lights actually reduces visual acuity. This is proven,
Hmm.
and many of the decisions made are not evidence based. When it comes to outdoor street lighting and crosswalks and stuff like this, there are people that, have come forward and said, "Hey, you know what? These crosswalks, even though they're brighter, are the person crossing is lost in brightness because of the flicker of the headlights of a car combining with the flicker of the headlights of the lighting of the crosswalk is making these saccades or whatever." And so we're kind of operating on assumptions that more light is better, whiter light is better, and put as much of it as you can, and that's great, and everything's good. Those assumptions are kind of like Egyptology and Clovis first are coming crashing down as the technology emerges. And I really, a lot of people are, that's creative destruction in the academy. It's good. You know what I'm saying? Like you talk about creative destruction in business all the time, but the academy needs to be shaken up a little bit too sometimes. And the speed at which lighting sciences are developing is, like your student said, you're wrong about circadian, Sandra. You weren't wrong. You just didn't have all the information yet. And I think
That's right.
we need to teach that way with a sense of humility that, hey, this science of lighting is actually, we don't even know what light is.
Mhm.
We don't actually know what it is. To me, let me throw this one at you. I think light is meta information, like a form of information. I think it's best thought of as meta information. It tells plants to grow. It tells the earth to revolve around the sun. I mean, it's doing all manner of things that, gravity and but light is sending messages to animals to go to sleep, to wake up, to feed, birds to migrate. They look at the stars. Whales look at the stars. They're sensing the stars. Like there's information in light that we've never thought of it like that before. Never thought of it as a type of information. Where's the Rosetta Stone? How can we figure out what this information is saying? That would be, I don't even know what part that would belong in, Sandra. Where
Yeah.
decoding what that light means is fascinating to me, and what the levels of light mean and what they do to us. So, lighting education is such a dynamic space. Greg, do you have any other final thoughts for Sandra here? We're coming up on 40. We're past 45 minutes.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that's just something that I've always been interested. I've always heard about, but I never really got the background on. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And I thank you for the time for me to explain what we're offering and what we do at the University of Colorado, and hearing you speak about all of these other topics. It's just so interesting to hear perspectives, different
Hmm.
perspectives in terms of what people need to know. And then the question for us is how much of that we can transmit. Sometimes it's just a matter of transmitting curiosity, right?
Yes.
It's one of those where you're saying, okay, you just mentioned the word metadata in light. Well, now I'm curious about that. I want to see if I
Hmm.
can explore that. It's not possible for any lighting program or any educational setting to provide all the
Hmm.
information that exists. And so part of this education is to create the environment for curiosity to happen and to ask the questions, the hows and the whys,
Hmm.
so that they can actually move forward and think before they actually apply this powerful tool. It's a
That's why
tremendous tool that we have at our disposal.
for sure, and that's why I think it's so important that like a lot of these kinds of conversations are the things that you get from going to a school and being around people studying. That's the soft part of it, right? Where you're learning about lighting and you're talking about lighting with professors and other people that are interested in lighting. And it's like that's why you can't do it all online. That's why you have to come to
That's right.
Boulder, and you got to spend a week here because you got to be in the lab, and then you got to meet this person, and then you talk about this, and it fires up that curiosity. It gets you in collegial with other people and talking about a subject. You're focused. You're finally focused on something. And then, I always compare it like the most beautiful poetry has the most amount of rules, but it doesn't sound like it when you read it, right?
That's right.
If you read a sonnet, it doesn't sound like there's any rules, but it's written in iambic pentameter and all this, it has this many syllables and it's 14 lines and all this sort of stuff, and it rhymes like this. And the freest, beautifulest poetry is written with the most rules. And so you focus yourself at an academy, at a school, you're learning about lighting, you're not online, you're with other people. All these other little seeds get planted, Sandra. And then you start to develop a career, but those seeds are still there and you're thinking about them, and you move forward in a career, and part of it's curiosity and interest, and other parts of it is making money, and some of it's your palette of art if you're a lighting designer. And that's why I just love the industry, and I'm so happy. I didn't even realize it was supposed to be about Boulder, Colorado, is it the University of Colorado? I thought we were
It's
just going to
University of
talk about
Colorado.
the lighting education, so I'm glad it worked out for you.
Here we are.
Yeah.
I'm
Wow.
Yeah.
representing.
Yeah. No, that was great. Yeah, I was wanted to talk to you a little bit about museum design, but maybe we can next time. We're coming up on the hour here. We don't want to go
Sure.
too long.
I'll be
Folks,
happy to.
If you made it to the end, there's a lot of all of the social media and the website for colorado.edu will be on the website, Greg. But we got to get focused right now, real quick. We got to go to energyfocus.com, man. That's ENERGYFOCUS.com. Their Enfocus system.
That's right. Enfocus tubes, LED tubes that can retrofit your existing linear fluorescent fixtures, bypass valves, put the tubes in, change the switch on the wall, gives you color tuning, dimming, no flicker, lowest cost option out there for human-centric lighting today.
Folks, I've said it many times. I'll say it again. The tuning ability of the switch on the wall from Enfocus in 2021 is exactly like the Lutron dimmer of 1969. When people see it, so easy to use, you give them an option. That's the first step. We're going to take these people on the first step. Trust me. Trust Greg. We sell millions of dollars of lighting personally every single year. We know what the customer wants to buy. And the customer is going to start off with, before their circadian and their, oh yeah, we're going to lower sick days and all that, give them a choice on tuning. That's the gateway drug to circadian lighting systems. Let them start seeing that they can change the colors of the light to whatever it is they want. Then we'll start prescribing them all kinds of systems. So go to energyfocus.com. That's ENERGYFOCUS.com. Of course, Greg, proud members of the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Whew, running out of breath here. And of course, the LC exam from the NCQLP is coming up in November, Greg. You're
Check
an
it
LC. I'm not. I don't like
I
taking
am.
tests. Sorry. Too late for me. Too late. Thanks for listening, folks. I know I speak on behalf of Sandra and Greg here at the end, and we always appreciate you. We love you. We love you, all you listeners out there. Bye for now.